Hello, all warriors of light and future warriors of darkness, and welcome back to another discussion video. Time travel. Whether it be by magic or science, it is perhaps one of the hardest stories that you can write about, because it's all too easy to make it messy and confusing, and basically lose the interest of your audience without even trying. It takes a really talented writer to make a good time travel story. One that not only is entertaining, but one that also makes sense. So the question here is, are we going to be expecting time travel in Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers? There has been a lot of talk in the forums these days that for the next expansion that we're going to be seeing time travel. Now, first of all, I want to make it absolutely clear, and I want to say that I do think it's possible. We have seen it in this game before. And so I do think that there is a chance that we could end up traveling somewhere through time. Now, the idea of time travel itself, it's good when it works. Time travel is a very complicated plot to write about, and it's tricky to add to a story. And I believe that only a really talented writer can make that in writing in a way that makes sense. But like with most things in life, there are certain rules that you need to follow. Rules that you have to know every single one, and you also need to know when to push them and even when to break them if you have to. All too often it feels like time travel becomes just a convenient plot that authors add in to make it sound better. But oftentimes it just ends up confusing and no one likes that. But when it's done right, it is an amazing story. Now here we have a good and bad example of time travel, and that would be in Harry Potter, both in The Prisoner of Azkaban and in The Cursed Child. The reason that time magic works so well in The Prisoner of Azkaban is because it was part of just one loop, and that there were certain limitations and restrictions that we had to obey. The reason it doesn't work in The Cursed Child is because the rules we thought we knew before were just thrown out the window, and we have alternate timelines and completely messed up futures where it feels like nothing is making sense, and that's no fun at all. The reason it works so well in the third book, however, is because their past selves and their future selves were both there for both versions of this loop timeline. Neither we, as the reader, or the characters are aware of what's going on until the end of their first run-through. They take action to prevent something that they thought already happened the first time around, only to set everything up to mean that it never happened to begin with, while giving their past selves the impression that it did. I know, it's really confusing. Trying to understand time travel is like banging your head against a brick wall until you have a headache and nothing seems to make sense. But basically, in the end, all the characters in that story were in the right place at the right time, and they ended up saving themselves and everyone else. Even though saving their own lives really wasn't the intended reason they went back to begin with. The first part of a story where time travel is involved, it's supposed to be full of questions and holes that don't add up. But when you get to the second part where you actually do go back in time, and by the time you reach the end, you have all your questions answered and all those holes filled in. That is how you write a good time travel story. Would time travel work in a game like Final Fantasy XIV? And to be honest, I'm not sure. I mean, if you can make it work in a loop, then I think there's a good chance that you can make a really good story. But this could get very messy very quickly, and I find a hard time trying to see how they could make this work. In the Final Fantasy series as a whole, we have seen time travel before, and we've seen it all the way back to the very first Final Fantasy. Garland was defeated by the Warriors of Light near the beginning of the game. After he was defeated, he was sent back in time by the Four Fiends so that he could send them forward in time to send them back. Which leaves the question of, where did this whole loop start? How can you get to an end without causing a major headache? That kind of time travel is very complex, and in the end they had to end up creating a whole new timeline where basically none of that ever happened. Another example where we have time travel is in Final Fantasy VIII, where we have Ultimecia. We really don't know anything about her, but that she is an extremely powerful sorceress from a distant future. And she's so powerful, she's able to possess the bodies of the sorceresses from the past, even though it's the present for Squall and the others. The problem in this is that we really don't get the chance to learn anything about Ultimecia or her plans or basically anything about her. I mean, we don't really know what her motives are or why she's doing this, but in the end it does work out. Because basically, when Squall and the others go to face Ultimecia, they kind of end up, temporarily at least, getting lost in time. And Squall ends up going back to his own childhood, where basically he ends up accidentally setting up the whole idea of the gardens and seed members and basically set the whole story into motion. In Final Fantasy XI, we have the Wings of the Goddess expansion, where we are seen traveling back and forward through time. Now, at first, it looks like this entire story of time travel is all part of just one big loop. At least until we find out that the world that we are part of is actually part of an alternate timeline from the original. Now, in the original timeline, basically it's all war and destruction, and it's just not a good place to be. And this creates all sorts of conflict with both ourselves and basically ourselves from this alternate timeline, where we are clashing and fighting with each other over a certain point in the past. And it doesn't look like anything is going to turn out right, at least until they find a way that both timelines can learn to exist side by side and still basically remain. In Final Fantasy XIII too, we have Sarah and Noel able to travel throughout all of time and space here, trying to find their friends and put a stop to Caius and his plan. Okay, so when you're dealing with this kind of time travel, it's very similar to the Cursed Child. Basically, they're able to travel to all sorts of different points throughout time, and their journey ends up branching out and they end up creating many different timelines. So it's hard to keep track of anything that's happened. And it's just one great big ball of confusion. I mean, in one part of the game, they're actually fighting against these giant robots that Hope helped to create, but then it vanished during the battle because Hope saw what happened and then made sure that those robots never existed. So basically, we fight these giant robots only for them to vanish a second later because they never existed and were never fully built. So even though we fought them, they never technically existed. Ugh, this is already giving me a massive headache. But anyway, this leads us back to Final Fantasy XIV. Now, we've already seen that there are different forms of time travel, and already we've seen different forms of time magic, such as with Gigi from the Hildebrand Adventures, who is able to turn the time back for a person or an object to a younger stage. But we also have the Wings of Time himself, Alexander. Now, this form of time travel worked well in its storyline because it was just like the Prisoner of Azkaban. It was just the one timeline, and it curls into one big loop. We're kind of thrown into this whole adventure to begin with because the goblins of the Illuminati are trying to bring back the primal Alexander so that they could travel through time and rewrite history in their own way. Through this entire adventure, we're having a hard time trying to beat the goblins because they have a book that apparently has recorded events before it actually happened. Eventually, we are sent back in time, but we don't stay there long, nor do we go back further than just a couple years. But because we did that, we end up accidentally leaving behind the notebook that has chronicled their adventures with Alexander with the Illuminati up until now. And of course, the leader of the Illuminati ends up finding this book, and he sees himself as some sort of prophet, that this is some divine message that he is meant to rule. And that basically starts his whole journey to revive Alexander and thus put us into this whole situation to begin with. Another example is when we're fighting against Alexander and we end up traveling through time and end up saving our own lives in the process during a future battle before we end up defeating the Illuminati once and for all. Later on, we learn that Alexander has looked over every possible future in every possible timeline before deciding that the best course of action was simply to erase itself from history. Instead, Alexander foresaw that our character will one day have the entire world put into their hands, so Alexander decided to trust them to decide the future. But strangely enough, it was stated that not even Alexander is able to see beyond that point in time, so we don't know what's waiting for us or what's going to happen. This whole talk about time travel began with the new expansion because Yoshi P was being extremely difficult about revealing exactly where the expansion takes place. And apparently there's a lot of references to time. And the trailer doesn't help things because we see the Warrior of Light wandering around in this dead environment while being attacked by creatures of light and a mysterious voice warning us that history must be rewritten. Well, you can understand why people are thinking this. But keep in mind that this is Yoshi P we're talking about, and he does like to troll us and make us second guess about everything and makes us wonder what's going to happen. So it shouldn't be such a big surprise that he's given us such a hard time. And I admit, time travel can happen. We've seen it before, and this is a fantasy game, so hey, you can do whatever you want to it. But do I think that they will put time travel into this expansion? Well, that depends. I do think that maybe we see some slight forms of time travel, but whether we ourselves end up traveling to the future and are able to wander this post-apocalyptic world that was basically drowned in a sea of lights, well, I doubt that. I mean, this is a game where you have instant zones and quests and daily content to do in them. And so the basic idea of time travel and being able to go to these places is not going to be easy. The one zone that we have seen so far that makes people convinced that we're going to be traveling through time is El Med, the land of the pixies. They say that by looking at the sky, this is proof we are in the future where the Calamity of Light came from. Okay, fine. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. We'll just say that this is a post-apocalyptic world where the Calamity of Light happens and basically these pixies have found a way to try to survive in this devastated world. My question is this: how would any of this work? The pixies are the new beast tribe, and we're surely going to be having to do beast tribe dailies from them. So that would mean that we will be able to travel to this place whenever we want. But time travel is extremely powerful and extremely difficult, and it's supposed to be full of restrictions, and how would this happen without becoming too complicated? Not only that, the pixies are supposed to be masters of the arcane arts, and so they should be able to create a safe zone where they could live in. Maybe they created some sort of barrier that keeps people out, and it makes sense to me that they can design this world as much as they like. Kind of like how areas like the Sylphlands or the Thorn March are so different from the rest of the world. The Sylphlands have this eerie darkness over their parts of the wood. I mean, I suppose it could just be through some thick trees, I suppose, but it just seems very odd to me that this part of the Twelves Wood is just so dark compared to the rest of it. And then we have a sort of pinkish sky when it comes to the Thorn March. So we really shouldn't be basing time travel on how the sky or the environment looks when we're dealing with beast tribes who can use magic. I actually know someone who thinks that El Meg could be Alamigo in the future, and I was like, really? Well, they say this is the future of Giro Albania because they have all these mountains in the back and they look a little too similar to Giro Albania now. But this is after the world's been blasted with lights. Not only that, the Ritika Greatwood could be the future Black Shroud. To be honest, I don't see it. I really don't think that these two look anything alike. Okay, logically, I presume that this is a few centuries or millennia after the apocalypse of light, and so of course, things are not going to look exactly the same. I mean, I can't even say that specific geographical features would change, but so they have mountains in the background. Big deal. A lot of places have mountains. That doesn't prove anything. I mean, if anything, if this really is the future, I mean, this looks more like a place you would find in the Dravanian hinterlands than actually in Alamigo. Now, in the trailer, it is confirmed for us that the Burning Forest, where we find Urianger and the Matoya Stola, if that is a name, is indeed the Raktika Greatwood. We have no idea what's going on, but we still have this Matoya Stola there, claiming that she will hold the line until our friend, where we presume she means us as either the Warrior of Light / Warrior of Darkness, returns. Yet despite this burning, we see the Greatwood is still full of life and beauty, so what is going on? Since we will still be able to travel to the Great Wood even after we finish the main scenario quest, we can only assume that the danger isn't as bad as we had thought it would be, or we somehow prevented it in the new timeline. Another thing people have been saying is that it can't be a coincidence that we are getting pixies in this game and that we'll be facing the primal Titania. Because back in Final Fantasy XI, Wings of the Goddess, where we're first introduced to the Pixie Beast tribe and meet their leader, Titania. And now in 14, we're doing the same thing. Okay, I give you that. It does seem a little bit too much of a coincidence. However, we need to remember that this is 14, not 11. So, do the designers really want to make a similar plot of time travel in this game as they did in the last one? If so, that just seems like lazy storytelling to me. Then there are those people out there who are pointing out more to dimensional travel, that we end up going to not only another dimension, but another time point in another dimension. Well, that's a completely different video. I am also going to be doing an entire video where we have all these theories about us traveling to another shard, but this video is for time travel only. And I'm afraid that, to me, dimensional travel doesn't imply time travel in my book. We also have people talking about time travel would fit with the line Thancred uses in the trailer. This place certainly has changed. Okay, I give you that as well. But trailers are known to troll us, so I wouldn't take everything they say too seriously. Not only that, but this can also be spoken after visiting a place after a long time. Like he'd been in that area like a long time ago, sometime in his youth, and this is the first time he's seen this place after being away for years. So that could also fit. What about Zodiac? Zodiac seems to have some sort of power over time and has given that power to the Ascians. Maybe we end up following them through time. I mean, it does seem that the Ascians have some sort of control over time. At least we saw a hint of that during our fight with Nabrialis. Well, my question is, if they could control time completely and they were able to travel back and forth whenever they want, they could have made sure that the Warrior of Light never existed. They could make sure that their plans always go through without any problems at all. They could reverse what happened to the world of the Void because they clearly weren't happy with it becoming a Void. So while they do seem to have some control over time itself, I do think it is severely limited. I don't think they're able to travel back whenever they want. The only way I can see that happening is if the Ascians suddenly grew more powerful and they only recently gained this ability to travel back through time and we end up maybe accidentally hitching a ride with them. Then we have some people who are talking about the prophecy we got at the beginning of the year. Destinies ordained are not man's to change, but history's chain may he yet disclaim. As Scion joined with stalk of withered bark, so we, defying doom, embrace the dark. This may sound like we're going to be time traveling again, but this does not mean time travel in my opinion. People, please. We could know something our entire lives only to learn something now that changes everything we thought we knew. I mean, when I was a kid, I always believed that it was Columbus who discovered America. And I was shocked when I found out that he wasn't the first person to ever arrive here. We had the Native Americans and the Vikings who found it first, but Columbus just got the official credit for it. And again, when the truth of the Dragonsong War was revealed to the Ashgardians, they thought that the war started because the dragons attacked them first, and it was the other way around the entire time. And only now is that history being set right. I think it more likely that we discover something in the past that changes everything we thought we knew. So in that sense, we are rewriting history. There's also some people who say in the Wings of the Goddess back in 11, we're able to access some new jobs, such as the Dancer and the Scholar. To obtain them though, you need to go back to the past and obtain them during the events during the war. I mean, I admit that could explain how we get the Gunbreaker job. And I think it would be cool if that's how Thancred learns to become a Gunbreaker. And maybe this also is our chance to learn the art of the Dancer. That would be amazing. And sure, since we have time travel in 8 and the Gunbreaker weapon is more based on Squall's gunblade than the kind the Garlean use, I guess I could see that. I wouldn't be opposed to it. But still, all of this boiled down to one question. Let's just say that the forum is completely right and we're going to be traveling through time. Let's just put that out there. Let's just say that it's right, it's what's going to happen, we can expect time travel. My question here is, are we going to be ending up going back in time or forward in time? If there is any time traveling, it makes more sense for us to go to the past or to have someone from the future come back to the past to our present, because the situation is so dire in the future that they have no other choice. I mean, I guess I could see why Minfilia aged down if we end up going back in time, but if you look at her eyes, she still has like this word of the mother infused with her, so that can't be it. If we go to the past to change something, that would certainly affect things in the present. So we go back in time to prevent a calamity from ever happening. People who were supposed to have died never died. And maybe the warriors of light who helped to fight on the fields of Cartano, maybe they never vanished. Maybe Louis Soir survived. And so the events that led up to us first arriving in Eorzea mean that we never would have became the Warrior of Light, and basically everything we fought up till now never took place. And so maybe we would no longer exist. We just ended up accidentally wiping out our own existence. But then if we go to an apocalyptic future to learn what happened, we could go back to our timeline so that we could avert it. Say we are pulled to the future for a short amount of time to be shown what is going to happen to us before we're immediately sent back. Like in A Christmas Carol, where Scrooge is shown his future if he doesn't change, and he's given a second chance to change all that. But then the dark future doesn't exist anymore. Which is the problem for us, because if these locations are in a doomed future, how can we still be allowed to go to them even after we go back and prevent the flood of light? The only way I can see this working is if we end up splitting the timeline like we did in 11. One where we have a doomed future and one without, which will justify us being able to visit these other future zones even after preventing the calamity of light. Okay, so right now we have two different versions of time travel. One of which is we end up going back to the past to prevent some event from happening. Either we travel back to a previous calamity, or we end up changing the entire timeline for our story, or by ensuring that the calamities go through as they're supposed to in a loop timeline. Or we could go to the future, because if we go to the future to see a terrible future, then we could end up going back to the present and preventing this bad future, so it doesn't exist anymore and therefore we can't go back. Now there's this whole idea of interdimensional time travel where we could go to the past/future of another shard. What is the point of that? We are already going to another shard, aren't we? So there's no need to make things more complicated by throwing time travel into it. But basically, people are saying that we end up going back in time to another shard to prevent it from falling. Such as we are going to the world of the first, and we prevent the flood of light coming in and changing the future of the shard, and thus the past. But then the warriors of darkness we met no longer have a reason to sacrifice their lives and meet us in the new timeline. So say we do jump to another world and end up traveling through time. We tried to prevent the first shard from falling to light. While we're there, we could find Minfilia, and that is where we could have this whole bunch of problems. First of all, why would she be a child again? If she wasn't in the world of the first to begin with, even if we do go back in time, why would she be there? Are we going to be facing the warriors of darkness when they're still the warriors of light and they see us as a threat? And even if we explain ourselves and help the warriors of darkness from ever becoming the warriors of darkness and prevent this possible erasement of their world from the light, the warriors of darkness never would have gone to our world in the source as the warriors of darkness. We never would have met them. We may never have learned about the other shards and just how dangerous that light could possibly be. And we never would have had Minfilia leave with them to prevent the world of the first from falling. Not only that, if we go back in time to prevent the destruction of the first, we never would have had a reason to go back at all, and therefore we created a paradox and new timelines just by being there. Time travel just doesn't fit with new, stable locations if they take place in other time periods. The only way that I could see this working is if we have a stable time loop. That whatever we do there was always what was supposed to happen. If we create a timeline where we have a glorious future, we still have no reason to return to the bad timelines for future quests. But then that goes against the voice saying that this history must be undone. I'm not sure what to think with that, other than the fact that we don't know who this voice is or if we can even trust them or what they want. If they want our help with something, then they should make themselves known to us and explain what's happening in person, otherwise this is never going to end. Now, I know that a lot of people really want this expansion to be as crazy and as exciting as possible, but there are ways to do that without just throwing everything into one pot and expecting it to work. But there is also another really good reason why I think that we won't be using time travel in the next expansion. Not only is time travel powerful and difficult, if we have this ability to suddenly travel wherever we want through time, I think the first thing that we would do is to go back and save Hoshafont from dying to begin with. Oh god, this whole talk about leaping through time is giving me a massive headache right now. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the idea of time travel for the expansion. Now, in all honesty, I do think that the voice is Alphinaud from the future, and he's trying to warn us on what's coming. And perhaps we do end up being pulled to the future to see what's going on and be warned on how to prevent this terrible future with a flood of light. But if we do, we won't be staying in the future, nor will it be some place that we can go to whenever we want. It's not going to be where all these new locations are going to be. If anything, the new locations are going to be key points in helping us prevent this terrible future to begin with, and that's the real reason that we need to head out there. To stop this future from ever taking place to begin with and give us a new future. But what about Minfilia in a child's form? Well, to be honest, I'm working on another entire video on Minfilia and what this could mean, both on her and the Word of the Mother, which should hopefully be out in a few days. But anyway, what about you all? Do you still think we'll end up traveling through time? If so, please leave a review down below and let me know why and your reasons for thinking that way. I'd love to hear it. And please subscribe for more videos, and if you have a possible suggestion for a future discussion, I'm always looking for something new to talk about. So I think that's it for now. So until next time, bye!